You would think it would be immediately if indeed they have if this massively disrupts the supply chains in Mexico. You hear that rumor of Samsung flew to Mexico to open up a mine for all of their doré and concentrate in order to, facilitate their battery operations. What does it do to a company like that? Do they rethink their problem? Are they some of the ones that are pulling the metal off of the exchange because of what they saw? This is a situation where it becomes even more imperative for the U.S. to do things like classify silver as critical because supply chains are being disrupted. And not only that, the exchanges by which these commodities are freely traded seem to be less than sincere. And when you realize we're now in the 6th year of a supply-demand imbalance into the billions of ounces cumulatively to 300 million ounces a year, this becomes a real problem when you are putting a big question mark in front of the very largest producer of silver in the world. Yeah, it has to have a problem. When there's no metal left to play with. And we're seeing that right now. I mean, we're beginning to see that right now in February. The February contract, which comes off the board completely and totally, which is still open. This late in the game, it's unbelievable to see this kind of open interest on the February contract. But
what does that mean? Open interest on the February contract?
Open contracts that haven't settled yet, and with 2 days left or 3 days left in both gold and silver. And what's interesting is that if you look at so far as of yesterday, the February cumulative deliveries amounted to just under 4,700 contracts at 5,000 ounces apiece. It was 23,195,000 ounces have been delivered onto COMEX. It doesn't mean it left, right? It was delivered. But here's the interesting thing. As of yesterday, actual February withdrawals leaving COMEX were 38,082,934. So that is 15 million more ounces than deliveries can explain. In fact, it's 164% of February delivery demand. This is a classic sign, not only of tightening physical conditions, but lack of trust. So more metal in the month of February has left than has been delivered. And left the building.
Left to where? Where is it going?
That's a good question. Who can take possession of almost 38,100,000 ounces of silver? If a mint box of Silver Eagles, which is 500 ounces, weighs 42 pounds, who's taking possession of 38 million? You're talking an armada of semi-trucks. Where is it going?
Where is it going?
I don't know. Is there any coincidence that this is happening leading up to not only the admission or declaration that silver is a critical mineral, but they're going to impose state-sponsored price floors and or strategic stockpiles? Is that what it means? Could it be the Exchange Stabilization Fund doing this covertly on behalf of the Treasury Department for national security? Could it be? Sure. I don't know who it is. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the metal that is being delivered is actually leaving, not all of it. And so I want to be very clear on that. Some of it stays within the COMEX ecosystem. But I would venture to say that a lot of the people are starting to question the wisdom of leaving it in the ecosystem with this kind of nonsense happening.
Well, is it being delivered because it's needed for industrial use? I mean,
sure,
would that make sense?
Absolutely, 100%. Especially if you need it for industrial use and you see the kind of nonsense that is being played over and over and over again in terms of desperation to keep it from going too high, or just let it fall as far as you want. And the circuit breakers were, there was a glitch. These are things that one time it's an outlier. 4 times within a couple of months, you start to question the wisdom of trusting said institution. Who would be silly enough, or who has the clout to do that? My only guess would be the shareholders of the CME Group, which are the big banks, and even the government, who is listed on the CME website as we do trade for national governments or for central banks they trade for. And now that metal has been classified national security priority, these things, I guess, shouldn't be that hard to imagine if it is in the sake of or in the name of preserving the integrity of not only the exchange, but some of the very, very big players who have been trying to get out of these positions, arguably. We're 4 days before the February contract has to deliver. Has to. 3 days now. As of yesterday, 4,366 contracts are still open. This late in the delivery cycle, everyone's focusing on March, which comes off the board also on Friday. But to see February still open is 24 times normal right now to have this kind of volume, 13 and a half tons that is still open. It's insanely high for this late in the cycle, even bigger than the March contract before they just knocked all of the open interest out of it. So in other words, you have someone who is short and hasn't closed out for weeks. And if they were planning on buying it back, it appears that were trapped. But the point of it is that how do you have, with 2 days left to deliver, this much in open interest in gold and silver still standing for delivery? It's a massive red flag. And I think, again, this is a market that works on confidence. And the moment the market believes there isn't enough metal, this leverage unwinds and in commodities unwinds violently. That's what they tried to stop, in my opinion.
A violent unwind, which would mean what?
It would mean a failure to deliver. It would mean a cash settlement, a force majeure, an admission of a paper Ponzi scheme. It's the lesser of two evils. And, how many people are really paying attention to 4 glitches since November? I don't know. We are, but I don't know how many other people are. It's just any of the big traders would have to understand what this actually means. And again, when you see vault withdrawals, 164% of the February delivery demand, again, this is telling you that players would rather pull that out, deal with the logistics, the security, the insurance themselves, because they don't trust leaving it within the COMEX eligible category. This is insane. And if we look at the March 2026 open interest 2 days ago, it was almost 48,000 contracts representing 240 million ounces. They just knocked the hell out of it and got it on sides. And again, but at what cost? They got it down to just under 10 million open interest, that there is enough silver to be delivered, but at what cost? When you see the market close after starting to move up, close or shut down because of some fault, and then open up and get clobbered right then and there, it just becomes so obvious. If it were me and I had this kind of exposure to the market, I would stand for delivery and I would pull it the hell out of the exchange as fast as I possibly could, because it's telling you by their actions, regardless of who said to do it and who was behind it, it's telling you by their very actions, it's a system that cannot be trusted anymore.
Right. I mean, let's see how this price explodes after this.
Totally.
I love putting you on the spot with a price forecast, because you've been so right before.
I hate making the price forecast, but it's interesting when you look at it. It seems like 70 is the floor and 90 is the ceiling for now in a trading range, a wide trading range between 70 and 90. It seems to get bought every time it drops below 70. It seems to get sold every time it touches 90. Yesterday was a good example. Bust through it and bang, they hit it. And that's something that we've seen throughout all of the years. There are these ceilings and these floors, and they try to get, through it. They get knocked down, they fall below it, and they come back up. Where does it ultimately go? I guess we'll see. But for the foreseeable future, I think $90 is a safe bet as to how high it will go without running into this kind of overt resistance. But that's just building steam and trading in a range before it makes its next violent leg upward, based on supply running into a very big problem with more demand than there is supply. I think you would have some form of disruption. I think if you're a board member watching what happened, I think it was Visalia, if I'm not mistaken, where 10 of their board members were kidnapped and murdered recently. And now you see this, where the majority of these mines are in Mexico, and at what point do you start to question the wisdom of that? There's always been the overhanging threat in any mining endeavor of geopolitical risk. This takes it to a whole new level, and I think it would have a profound impact. 100%, at least until things get under control. You would think it would be immediately, if indeed they have if this massively disrupts the supply chains in Mexico. You hear that rumor of Samsung flew to Mexico to open up a mine for all of their doré and concentrate in order to, facilitate their battery operations. what does it do to a company like that? Do they rethink their problem? Are they some of the ones that are pulling the metal off of the exchange because of what they saw? This is a situation where it becomes even more imperative for the U.S. to do things like classify silver as critical because supply chains are being disrupted. And not only that, the exchanges by which these commodities are freely traded seem to be less than sincere. And when you realize we're now in the 6th year of a supply-demand imbalance into the billions of ounces cumulatively, 200-300 million ounces a year, this becomes a real problem when you are putting a big question mark in front of the very largest producer of silver in the world. Yeah, it has to have a problem. I don't think they could really easily do it for their natural resources. It's one thing, and again, I'm not an expert on what has transpired over the last 50 years in Venezuela, but when you have the Western oil companies built the infrastructure and had a deal in place until Maduro took over, you have a leg to stand on. When you talk about going into a country like Mexico because of the cartel and using it as an excuse to take over their silver mines or their silver production, it seems like a stretch. The difference between a multinational mining company and a government. And, if you are a company like First Majestic who has mines in Mexico, obviously this is on your radar. You think about it, you start to bring in some serious security, and that raises the cost. It's going to hurt probably the bottom line on their share price. All of these things come into play, but I would have a very hard time believing that this administration would go in under the guise of eradicating this terrorist group that they have now named the cartel terrorists and use it as a stepping stone to nationalize or take over their silver production. That seems kind of far-fetched to me.
Yeah. Just putting it out there.
No, I mean, it's a fair point because you look at what they did, what his aspirations are in Greenland, which again is very different. The rhetoric with Canada and Venezuela, he's certainly doing things that are provocative, but that would, I think, be a little too far of a line to cross. And if I had a gun to my head, I would say that the inordinately large deliveries between 30 and 70 million ounces every month for the last 15, 16 months is partially the U.S. government under the umbrella of the Exchange Stabilization Fund, where they, if it's national security, do not need to get congressional approval and do not need to speak about it. And again, who is pulling 38 million ounces out? Where's it going? To your point, could it be Samsung and Sony and Tesla? Sure, it could. But could it be the national government or the Treasury Department? Absolutely, it could. I mean, what more do you need to hear? And if you ask yourself, who the hell has the power to make the CME Group do this? How much further do you have to look? Look, there's a fine line between conspiracy and reality. And I was reading on X today, and there was a commentator saying this isn't manipulation. This is an orderly drawdown of open interest, like it always is. How can anyone call what we just saw orderly? It's not orderly. It is anything. It's far from orderly. It's chaotic, and it's overt. And yes, the CME Group always finds a way to draw down open interest into the delivery month so that it does not exceed what can be delivered. Once again, they did it, but at what cost? And anyone who would claim that this is orderly, I disagree with. This is flippant. This is right in your face, and what are you going to do about it kind of thing. And that's, to me, why you see lots of metal now leaving. In fact, way more than the February deliveries can explain. So I don't know. I think that right there was very, very telling on just how plausible it would be that the gold and silver that we've seen come in since a year ago, November, in massive amounts that is being delivered to COMEX. Some doesn't leave, a lot doesn't leave, but now we see some leaving and maybe a lot leaving. So that to me would easily be one of the top choices. In fact, probably is my top choice as to who is behind this. Maybe someday we'll figure it out, but they're telling you that it's vital to national security. What more do you need to know?